Welcome to New Wave Jiu-Jitsu Closed Guard. In this video, I want to present to you a simple and systematic approach to closed guard that will make it an effective part of your no-gi game. The use of closed guard in contemporary no-gi jiu-jitsu has generally fallen out of favor. Most athletes favor the use of open guards in an age of leg locks and scrimmage wrestling up from bottom position. This is unfortunate, as closed guard still has a lot to offer contemporary athletes. Closed guard still has some considerable advantages over open guard. In particular, it offers much greater control over distance and movement than open guard ever will. This can be used to advantage in so many ways that we will study in this video. Closed guard is unusual among guard positions insofar as it creates an immediate asymmetry of attacking opportunity. From closed guard, my opponent cannot realistically attack, but you can attack easily. Your opponent can only start to attack you after he has opened your guard. The big theme of this video is that the only way an opponent will be able to open up your guard is if he can achieve a posture that enables him to do so. This means, in most cases, your opponent must move his head and chest up and away from you and get to a standing position and rise to a vertical posture. The whole battle from closed guard is essentially a battle over your opponent's posture. He wants to rise up and away to standing. You want to break him down and forward to his hands on the floor, or to make his shoulders go below his hips, or backwards to his buttocks onto the mat. Whoever wins this battle for posture generally wins the position overall. If you can win the battle for posture, the next step is to keep your opponent in a broken posture by locking him down with upper body grips. Then you will want to shift yourself into an advantageous attacking position. We will look in detail at the best attacking positions in this video, from where we can attack with upper body submissions and sweeps. Interestingly, if we lose the battle for posture and your opponent builds up to standing, you can still win the game overall by switching direction to the one part of the human body that good posture will not defend, the legs. The only way an opponent can deny his upper body to you will always expose his legs to your attacks. This creates a crystal clear game plan from closed guard. You will start by trying to break your opponent's posture down. If you succeed, you can attack his upper body from dominant positions with submissions or sweeps. If you fail, you can attack his lower body with submissions or sweeps. Either way, you come out the winner. I will also cover the use of closed guard for shorter, stockier athletes who are often told that their body is not the right type for closed guard play. By using a simple two-stage philosophy that juggles lower body connection and upper body connection, shorter athletes can make very profitable use of closed guard. So then, let's get started now with New Wave Closed Guard. Welcome to New Wave Jiu-Jitsu Closed Guard. We're going to start off with just a brief spiel about the advantages and disadvantages of closed guard. My students are mostly known for their work with open guard. Nonetheless, when we spar with each other, we do closed guard rounds every single day. And I believe that closed guard still, in an age of leg locking and wrestling up from bottom position, still has great value in your jiu-jitsu game overall. It's very, very important you learn it and master it. Talking in terms of advantages and disadvantages. Okay. When I work from open guard situations, regardless of whether it's seated or supine, it's very hard for me to control distance between myself and my opponent. This becomes even more difficult when Placido elects to stand up. In situations like this, Placido is very much in control of the distance game. When I try to play distance on him and move towards him, I'm stuck on my ass. This guy's moving around on his feet. He has a huge mobility advantage. So Placido will get to initiate when and where we make contact. If he doesn't want to make contact here, and he decides he wants to make contact out there on the mat, I have to follow him. If he decides he wants to play over here, close to the perimeter, I have to follow him. It's hard for me to determine where and when we make contact, because he's in control of distance. That all changes in a closed guard situation. In closed guard, your legs are locked around your opponent's midriff. So when he just tries to move away from me, it's not going to happen. Wherever he goes, I go. I'm stuck to him. As a result, you are in control of distance. And you'll find that if he even wants to bring his shoulders away from you, even that small level of distance control, you will find that you have a great ability to control distance through a combination of your legs and your arms. Okay? When he goes to pull away, it won't be so easy when you have these closed guard positions that you can work from. Okay? You have a tremendous control over distance from closed guard that you simply don't have in the case of most open guards. And so that's your first big advantage. Your second big advantage is a tactical advantage. Whenever you have closed guard, there's literally nothing high percentage that your opponent can do to you as long as he's inside your closed guard. In an open guard situation, there's good things I can do from here, and there's good things Placido can do from there. Placido can attack my legs, he can go for guard pass, do all kinds of things. When Placido's in my closed guard, the very few attacks that he has while he's still locked inside my closed guard are so low percentage that they just don't work. Anytime you have someone same size, same skill level, you never see them in world championship competition. Okay, you know, you could go for an American lock or a Kimura while he's inside, or an Ezekiel while he's inside my closed guard. These are very, very unlikely to work against someone your own size and skill level. Pretty much everything he wants to do in terms of leg locks and guard passes, first he's got to open my closed guard. Until he does that, he is pretty much 100% defensive, and his posture will usually reflect this. I, on the other hand, can easily attack from positions like this. There's many attacks I can use. We'll be looking at a whole bunch of them in this video. So there's a huge tactical advantage for the bottom closed guard player, that he can attack anytime he feels like it, but the opponent must first open the closed guard before he can really try anything, okay, regardless of whether he's interested in leg locks or guard passes. So there's a sense here in which, even though I'm in the bottom position, I'm in control tactically, because I get to attack when I feel like it. He has to first go through the machinations of opening my closed guard before he can even think about offense. Okay, so that's your second big advantage, the tactical advantage. The third big advantage is a mechanical advantage. When you're in closed guard, something remarkable happens. You're in bottom position, but your hips are on top of your opponent's hips. The hips are the most important part of your body in any combat sport. In open guard situations, my hips are on the floor. Okay, I have no contact with his hips, and I certainly don't have no part of my body is on top of his. That all changes in closed guard. Placido's upper body is on top of mine, but my lower body is on top of his. And this has a dramatic effect. What it means is, if we ever change position, and there's two major ways that can happen. First, I can get outside of his elbow, or I can flip him over from top position to bottom position. If this ever occurs when I have my two knees around him, this means that I fall into the mounted position. Okay? This stands in contrast with open guard sweeps. If you're standing, Placido. In the case of any form of open guard sweep, when my training partner goes to fall, you don't end up mounted, you just end up with a reversal position. You go from your guard to his guard. Okay? In the case of closed guard situations, particularly those where my feet stay close together, you find yourself in situations where any form of reversal results directly in the mounted position. Any form of movement outside of my training partner's elbow results in the rear mounted position. Okay? So because your hips are higher than your opponent's hips, if there is a change of position towards your opponent's back, or a change of position towards getting on top of your opponent, you will find that not only do you get the sweep or reversal, you get the two best positions in the sport, the rear mount or the mount. This stands in great contrast with open guard, where typically a reversal just results in a change of top or bottom position. So closed guard does have that enormous advantage over open guard. When there's reversals, either to the back or the top, They tend to be very dramatic reversals. Okay. Now, those three considerations might make you think, man, closed guard's very valuable, and we should definitely be going for this, and it should be a big part of our game. I agree with you. However, like everything in life, it comes at a price. There are some disadvantages to closed guard. The first major disadvantage we'll look at is the idea that closed guard, to a slightly greater degree, it forces you to be more mindful of leg locks. Okay, I often hear people today say that closed guard is irrelevant or out of date now because of the leg lock revolution. That is absolutely categorically false. It just means you need to be more mindful of them. Okay, if I'm naive, and when my opponent splits my guard, I allow him to keep my knees facing up to the ceiling and my feet behind his hips, yeah, it's a disaster. He's going to go into Ashigarami pretty much anytime he feels like it. Okay, so that is true. However, all this requires us to do is to be more mindful that when the guard breaks, we have to be mindful of where our legs need to go in order to be safe. Now, we'll be showing exactly how to do this later on in this video in the leg lock section. Okay, but initially, let's say this. It is not true that closed guard is irrelevant, because leg locks are far more prevalent today than they were 10 years ago. It is true, however, that if you're going to use closed guard in a room full of dangerous leg lockers, that the second your guard opens, you will need to be very mindful of your leg and in particular your knee position. We'll be looking at exactly how to do that later on in this video. So this is a minor disadvantage of closed guard. With regards other disadvantages of closed guard. In closed guard situations, when my opponent goes to stand up and move away from me, often in situations like this, you'll have your feet behind your opponent's back. Okay, and this can create extended legs. Extended legs, never a good thing. As Placido moves away from me and catches my legs in a state of extension, nope, it's very easy for him to start throwing legs by and go into toreando passes and start going on the attack. Okay, so there is a period of vulnerability where, as your opponent comes up and opens your guard, if my feet stay behind the back and we get extended legs, it's very easy for him to start coming around the legs now. Okay, so again, it's a question of mindfulness. Don't think this is a drawback of closed guard itself. It's just a drawback of the way certain people use it. We just need to be mindful of the idea that when someone does open up our closed guard, we can't have the feet behind the hips, okay, for extended periods of time. They must come back in front, and preferably either with some kind of connection to our opponent, or at a minimum, our knees to our chest, so that they can't dominate the space between our knees. We'll be discussing this at length later on in the video, but this is an important consideration. Okay, so in terms of disadvantages of closed guard, if we use closed guard naively and we don't determine how we transition from closed to open guard, yes, it's true. You can be vulnerable to leg locks, and yes, it's true. You can be vulnerable to a fast guard passer. However, this doesn't mean that closed guard is ineffective. It just means we need to be more mindful of where our legs are at the exact moment our closed guard opens. Another disadvantage of closed guard situation is that it will often allow an opponent who's determined to stall more leeway to stall with you. When someone's in my open guard, it's not impossible for them to stall. They can really only do it by backing away from you, okay? And that kind of stalling is very obvious to both the referee and the audience, and people tend to get penalized for it pretty quickly. If they're down and an open guard, it's pretty hard for a guy just to completely stall me out here, okay? There's good attacks I can do. I can get underneath people, I can offset their bounce, you can go outside the elbows. There's so many options available here that pretty much the only way someone can stall is to actively disengage. And that kind of stalling is so obvious to everyone who's watching that it's tough for an opponent to do that for a period of time without getting called for it. Closed guard is a little different. In closed guard, a knowledgeable opponent can put on the appearance of activity without the intent of activity quite easily. Some guys make it kind of obvious. They just come in and they just smother your hips and they just hold on here. And it's not immediately clear who's doing the stalling, okay? he definitely isn't doing anything, but I'm not doing anything either. We're both kind of static. Now, the reason I'm static is because I can't move. He's got his elbows locked tight to my hips, and I can't really move that much. But neither one of us is moving, so the referees say, well, both of you move. Okay, he could move if he wanted to, and I can't if I wanted to, because my hips are locked in place. So even if I open up my guard now, it's hard for me to move because he just holds in on the hips. Okay, so it's not so obvious who's the one stalling here. Okay, even if the referee is good and he understands it's probably him who's doing the stalling, he can just make it look like he's doing something. Okay, he can stand up, fake opening my guard, fail, and then come back down. And then I'm holding on to him. I try to get an attack. Nothing's working. He comes down. He holds for 10 seconds. Then he goes back up. So it looks like he's active. He gets up, goes to open my guard. I'm threatening him. He comes back down. And so it looks like he's active, but we all know he's not. Okay, so one potential problem with closed guard is that because it's a little easier for your opponents to stall, there can be times where your opponent will take advantage of that and you can get stuck there for long periods of time. In these cases, I almost always recommend a transition to open guard where it's much harder for people to stall and go to work. So this is another potential problem with closed guard. There is a greater danger of stalling. A third problem associated with open guard. This is a criticism which is voiced quite often. I don't think it's the fairest of criticisms, but I'll put it out there. Many people complain that closed guard is intrinsically more physically tiring than open guard. That's because there's a much higher degree of isometric tension as you go to hold a closed guard. I personally think it's a slightly unfair criticism. I think that open guard is tiring in a different way. Open guard is tiring in an aerobic kind of way. There's a lot more movement. And closed guard is tiring in an isometric anaerobic kind of way because you're just holding set positions for long periods of time. They're both tiring, just in different ways. But the criticism is this. The idea is that when someone's here in your closed guard, the movements are so small that we tend to focus on just gripping people tight and holding tense isometric positions for long periods of time. Okay? The whole time you're working from closed guard, you're kind of in a crunch position while you're doing something kind of like a pull-up. So it's like doing a combined crunch and pull-up at the same time. You do this for 5 minutes, it starts getting pretty damn tiring. This gets worse when people stand up on you and you're holding on to them, they go to stand up, and you're holding on in these kind of set positions, like so. I can hear Placido working hard. I'm getting fat, aren't I, Placido? So in these situations, you're putting in quite a bit of tension just to hold people for extended periods of time. Many people complain that this is a very tiring way to fight. I agree, it can be tiring, but I mean, open guard is tiring just in a different way. It's a lot more movement. But this is a criticism which is often voiced at closed guard. And now probably the single most common criticism that I hear is that the criticism that closed guard is much more suited to tall people with long limbs, and that closed guard is not appropriate for shorter, thicker athletes. I think there's definitely some truth to this. I think I'd be a liar if I said that someone who's 5'3" and weighs 150 pounds is going to be as good at closed guard as someone who's 6'4" and 200 pounds. There's definitely some truth to this. However, one of the big themes that I'm going to push in this video is that short, thick athletes can make very good use of closed guard. They just need a strategy. I'm going to offer you a 2-stage strategy later on in this video where I believe that closed guard can be used very beneficially by shorter, thicker athletes. Will you be doing the same breadth of moves as a long, tall athlete? No, but you'll have something you can work with very well. I also believe that most people tend to underestimate what they're physically capable of because they don't take enough advantage of height and angle from closed guard. If you do a good job of getting angles on your opponent, do a good job of getting height advantages on your opponent, shorter, thicker athletes can be highly effective from a closed guard, much more so than they think. I do believe that everyone would benefit from being a couple of inches taller if they played closed guard, but don't sell yourself short. Don't think, oh, I'm a certain height and body type, so I just can't play closed guard at all. I think all of us can be very effective from closed guard, but I will concede that taller, leaner athletes do typically favor closed guard over shorter, thicker athletes. Nonetheless, there will be an entire section in this video on how shorter, thicker athletes can be highly effective using closed guard. We're going to show you guys a ton of technique through this video, but all of it has more or less one common theme, that ultimately every battle from closed guard is a battle over posture. Your opponent knows what he needs to do to succeed, and you know what you need to do to succeed. Let's have a look at this right now. From Placido's perspective, as the person in my closed guard, his whole game is going to be to move his head away from mine and achieve an initial posture at roughly 45 degrees. Okay, why 45 degrees? Because he needs to keep a post on my body. If Placido had no contact with my body and just went up to vertical posture on his knees, I could easily pull him in because he has no posts on my body. I just pull him in with my legs. So he needs to maintain posts on my body. Some guys choose the biceps, some guys choose the armpits, some guys choose the throat. Okay, they're all decent choices, but this will be the first step in his posture. Okay, so from my perspective, I want him broken down, more or less chest to chest. Okay, I want angle out to the side. We'll cover that soon, don't worry. From Placido's perspective, he's going to want to get inside and build up and away to 45 degrees. Once he's done this, he's going to be very interested in the idea of standing up. As he stands up, initially his body will be at an angle roughly parallel to the mat. Then from here, he will build up into vertical posture. This is his final goal. When his shoulders are directly over his hips, he's in a strong position to open my closed guard. Once he's opened the closed guard and forced me to convert into open guard scenarios, now it's an even battle. He's got what he wanted, and now we're in open guard situation. Okay? So you have a very clear idea of what your opponent wants. He wants first posture through the head and shoulders. His head and shoulders moving away while maintaining posts. Then he wants to stand up. From the stand up, he will initially be somewhat bent over, but he will want to build into vertical posture. Vertical posture in the standing position will almost always be his final goal. Your whole goal as the closed guard player is to prevent that transition. Your goal will be first to stop that ability on his part to get up and away from you with his head and shoulders. You'll be looking consistently to break him down into situations where he's caught more or less chest to chest with you, in situations where it's hard for him to get back to the inside position with his hands. Okay? If you fail at this and he does get up into a position where he begins standing, your whole thing is to use the legs to pull him back into you and start removing these posts which enable him to build up his posture. If you fail in that regard and he gets up to his feet, then from here you will be looking to knock your training partner backwards and return him to the mat. Okay? If he fights his way back up, now the whole cycle will begin over again. So there will be this eternal battle over posture. You will be looking to knock your opponent backwards, or in most cases, pull them in and forwards and prevent them from getting to those built up positions on their knees first and on their feet second. And the whole game will be a tug of war over posture, where you are consistently looking to break their posture mostly forwards, but also backwards too. They will be looking to maintain their stance and their posture all the way up to vertical until they can open your guard. Learning how to win that battle for posture is a huge, huge part of your ability to win from closed guard in general. Learning how to deal with failure when he wins the battle for posture is also a big part of the game, because you're not going to win every battle over posture. Okay, if you're fighting guys your own size and skill level, you're going to lose a lot of times. So you've got to have some kind of way of recovering. We will be looking at that later on in the video. Most of the time, however, we're going to be trying to win that battle for posture. We're going to show exactly how to do it in the next section. But please, conceptually, let's think in terms of there's a million battles out there in closed guard, but the one you always want to fight first and fight hardest for is the battle over posture. You know what he wants, you know what you want. Now, we've just stated that the battle for posture is essentially the whole battle of closed guard. So a good place for us to start is, how the hell do you win that battle? Let's have a look at that right now. Okay, when someone's in our closed guard, it's natural to look at the arms as the primary method of winning the battle for posture. Okay, they're right there. You can start gripping people and pulling down. Okay, this is to condemn yourself to failure right from the start. The most you can be when you just use your arms to battle for posture is an annoyance to your opponent, but you won't be very successful. Let's understand that the primary element of off-balancing always comes from the legs and hips, regardless of whether I'm off-balancing them forwards or backwards. Okay? Now, the major thing that you're fighting against will always be the posts of your opponent's arms. Let's do a little experiment to start with. Let's understand it's not just the posture which holds my opponent up. Placido, can you take your two hands and put them behind your back? Now, take your spinal muscles and arch them so that your posture feels strong. Okay? Here, he's using his spinal muscles to hold himself up in perfect upright posture. But you will see that this is worthless if I pull with my two legs. It will immediately bring him forward into a position where his posture is broken. Okay? What really holds him up is never going to be his postural muscles. Rather, it's going to be the posts that he puts on my upper body. If he chooses to put the post short down here at the hips, it's very, very hard for him to hold his posture adequately because he doesn't really have enough length forward to stop me from pulling him in. It's pretty easy under these circumstances to fold him and break him down like so. So what you're going to find is your opponent's posts must be placed above the line of my chest. The three main options will be the biceps, the armpits, and the throat. Most people, when they use a throat post, go single post. It's very rare to see this kind of thing. Looks kind of weird, to be honest. They'll typically go one on the throat and one on the hip with the elbow inside. Okay, so the three most common options are double biceps, double pits, and single throat with a hip. Okay, regardless of which one our opponent chooses, we'll work with double biceps because that's probably the most common. Regardless of how our opponent goes to post, if I'm going to break this guy's posture, I got to get rid of his posts, because when he posts hard and he employs his postural muscles, that's when the pull of my legs is inadequate to break his posture. So what we're always looking to do is to swim inside. Once my hands come inside and I can bring the hands over my shoulders, that's when the pull of my legs beats his posture. Okay? So if we go inside wrists, 1, 2, that's one way to ensure that our opponent cannot make adequate posts. If I expose my biceps to my opponent, that's when he has strong posts and I cannot break him down. But if I take his posts over my biceps and shoulders, that's when it's pretty easy for us to pull with our legs and break this guy's posture. Okay? If he posts on the throat, I always recommend 2-on-1, and then from this position, take the post off. Once the post comes off, it's always the same thing, fellas. You're pulling with the legs. Okay? As the knees pull, that's what breaks your opponent's balance. If he goes into your armpits, they typically bring the elbows down like so, and now you feel it's pretty difficult to work. Okay? Now I have to work to get my hand in. Make a strong arm, Placido. If I just try to bring my hand in, it's not going to work like that. I need to shift my hips, and as a result, we can finagle the hand inside. Once my wrist goes in on one side, make your arms as strong as you can, Placido. From here, it's very easy for me just to flick my training partner's wrist out of the armpit, and then we find ourselves with a broken posture. Okay? So the basic battle lines that are drawn here, what holds your opponent up is not his postural muscles alone. Again, the same experiment, Placido, hands behind your back, make your postural muscles as strong as you can, arch your body, so he's at maximum postural power. This will not stop me from pulling in with my legs and breaking his posture relatively easily. Okay? What makes him hold his posture is his hands, but they can't be placed by my hips. That's very easy to break his posture. They have to be above my chest. Okay? If he just puts them on my chest, it's kind of slippery. It's not very effective at all, and it's really easy to go in and take it off. So most of your opponents are going to go on the biceps. When we see this, we go 1, 2, and then we take the hands over our shoulders, pulling in with the legs. We've broken the posture. If he goes in the armpits, then we have to move our body a little bit and bring at least one hand inside. Then we pull, and get his hands down to the mat and break his posture. If he throat posts, then we go 2 on 1, remove the post, and bring his hand on by. Okay? So some initial thoughts. It's not the postural muscles themselves that hold your opponent up when he's on his knees. It's the combination of posts on your body. And those posts must, at a minimum, be above the line of your chest. Your job is to get rid of those posts. Don't just fight the posts with your hand and try to pull them in with your hands. Use your hands to remove the posts and then break his balance with your legs. You will hear me talking all the time about a knee pull. A knee pull, just like it sounds like, is the pull of my 2 knees from closed guard where my knees come up towards his armpits. And my legs pull everything inwards. Okay, as the posts become less and less effective, you pull this guy in. Okay, so our whole thing is remove the posts with your hands. But what breaks his balance is the knee pull, as my knees pull in like so. Once that occurs, the balance is broken, and now we can start holding people down. Okay, this knee pull also works when someone goes to stand up. When they go to stand, slow down, back up. When they go to stand, some people will jump up. Most people will stand up. 1, 2, back down. Now, the best time for you to knee pull is when someone stands up one leg at a time on the second step. So I usually don't challenge the first step. I let them go up. Now, this is where I challenge them. As you see the second step coming, very slow. Watch what happens to Placido's head and right foot. You see how the head moves? And there's a stagger in his step. Back down. That's because Placido is carrying my weight. So watch Placido, spin me so that my head faces the camera, right? Okay. Watch Placido's head when he goes to stand up the second leg. It has to move over this knee, okay, in order to stand up. If Placido doesn't move his head and he goes to stand up,
I have to like jump.
He has to jump. There's no other way to do it. And it's really awkward. Yeah. So basically what he has to do is he has to move one leg up, and then this head goes over, and that's how people stand, okay? You have to learn to take advantage of this. So as Placido goes to stand, I time the second step and break him down every time, okay? Every time Placido goes to stand, I let him go 1 and 2. He goes up, go 1 and 2, and he never gets up to his feet, okay? So this is the theory of the second leg. The best time to break someone's balance when they're standing on you is as they take the step with the second leg, okay? Now, that's all good. That's wonderful. The knee pull, very strong when they're down on 2 knees, very strong when they go to stand up. But there's going to be times people do stand up on you. You're not always at your best. Sometimes, some guys are just damn good. They jump up to their feet, or you're daydreaming and they just get up to their feet and you're like, oh shit, what do I do now? Okay? Don't worry. Your knee pull can still be very effective even when they're on 2 feet. Let's check this out. Okay. Placido does a good job of standing up. Now, as he gets up to his feet, let's understand that initially, Placido still needs his posts. Okay, let's do an experiment here. Back down, Placido. Placido, take your hands off me and try to stand up with no hands on my body, without posts.
It's tough. I cannot. Yeah, it's really hard. I have to really work. I can't do it.
You'll never get the second step.
It's tough.
It's impossible. The only way you can do it is to be posted on me.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like mission impossible.
Maybe the Chinese powerlifter could.
Maybe that guy could do it. Yeah,
but it's tough.
Not the average person. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you threw me off there, Placido. If you go to stand up, buddy, he has to transition from this position here, where his posts are on me. Remember, he has to stand up with posts. If he doesn't have posts, he won't stand up. Okay. When he goes to go up to vertical, he's carrying my weight. What I do is I take my knees towards his armpit. You won't see anything because my legs don't move. But Placido will tell you, when he goes to get up, you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world, okay? And all I'm doing is bringing my knees towards his armpit. Now, Placido, you're getting quite strong these days. When you go, you'll get up, but it's going to be hard work. It's not going to be free. So as you go, it's going to carry me into situations where we'll be able to sweep people, as we see later on in the video. It's hard work. Okay?
Yeah, it's slower, and I immediately feel more tension in my hamstrings.
Yes. So, as we lock up, first things first, if he's on two knees, we know now from experimentation he must have posts on me. If Placido doesn't have posts, hands behind the back, Placido, I don't care how strong his postural muscles are. He can do whatever he wants. He can arch, he can do whatever he wants. He's never going to stop me from pulling him in. Okay. Secondly, if he does put posts on me, but they're below the line of the chest, he can put as much strength into his posts as he wants. He can hold himself up and do whatever he wants. He'll never stop me from pulling him in. Okay. So he has to put his posts up above the line of the chest like so. This creates a situation where when he commits with the posts, my job is to get inside and weaken the purchase that he has on my body. Right now he has a good purchase because he's on my biceps. Okay, and these biceps are pretty damn impressive. I'm not going to lie.
Pure steel,
okay?
pure American steel.
As my opponent goes to stand up. If he has a good purchase, he can get up, back down, but I steal the purchase from him. I put my hands in, he doesn't have a good purchase. Okay. Once he loses the purchase on my body, I just pull with my two knees. I know you don't see much because it doesn't look like my legs are moving. But what Placido will tell you is there's a constant tension forwards with my knees towards his armpits. As Placido goes to move, you just get inside and break this guy down to his base. Okay. Now, if he does get one leg up, time the second step. That's his vulnerable time. As he goes up to a second step, it's so easy just to break him down with a simple knee pull. Okay? If he does get all the way up, our job is to put weight with our knees behind his armpit so that when he goes to posture up, he feels like he's carrying the weight of the world. And that's going to make it very easy for us to off balance in opposing directions. Okay? So, the theory of breaking our opponent's balance and close guard. Everything is based around the idea of your opponent's posts. Postural muscles by themselves will not be enough to stop a determined opponent in the bottom position. Your opponent will have to post on you. He can't post down low, that's not effective. He has to post up above the line of the chest. Most people go on the biceps, the armpits, or the throat. In all three cases, your job is to remove the posts, either by physically taking them off or getting inside them. Once that occurs, knee pull. The knee pull is simply the action from close guard of pulling your knees in towards your own armpits, up behind his armpits. This action here. Okay? Try to time your pull. The best time is when people take the second step to stand up, but it's also highly effective even after they've stood up or when they're down on two knees. Now, the only way my opponent can stop this from happening is to go into a standing position and form an exaggerated pull back. And it's not going to come easily for him. He's going to have to work. But this puts weight on our opponent's heels and will set up off balances in a rare direction. So the second great directionality is scoop off balances. Okay, you've learned the knee pull. Now you've got to learn how to off balance with a scoop. Okay, if Placido puts one leg up and now postures up and away from it, no, just postures up and away from me, we can scoop inside the leg. The idea behind a scoop is I want to push my hips over my training partner's hips and extend the leg out and put him down on his ass. Okay, so he goes to a hand and his ass. Okay, so once again, sorry about that. So he goes to stand, puts one leg up. We can always take the foot forward in the direction the toes are pointing and throw our hips over his hip. That's the direction there. Okay, I arch and throw everything over the top of the hip. Okay, why is this easy? Because he's resisting my knee pull. I'm doing everything to pull him in with my legs. He puts a leg up. I'm giving that strong pull. I feel Placido working against the knee pull. and we take him backwards. Okay, it becomes even more dramatic when Placido successfully stands up in my closed guard. From here, I'm pulling in with my legs. He's pulling up. And then, sorry, buddy, we go in the opposite direction and knock him down. Okay, so those are your two fundamental methods of off-balancing. The idea is that we're going to perform the knee pull forwards. We've seen how to do that in detail. The only way your opponent can resist a knee pull is to put so much postural force in a backwards direction that while we maintain our closed guard, we can scoop either in a situation where he's got one leg up or he's stood up to his feet. Now, your question may be, what if he doesn't stand up? What if he's still down on his knees? That's when we start using hip heisting. So, from a situation where our training partner elects to stay on two knees, we're trying to pull him in and he's resisting and posturing back. We're just going to put our hand here across our training partner's shoulder. And from this position, we're going to quickly throw our body up to an elbow and then from elbow up to hand. Now from here, we punch everything over and we start that action of driving across and putting our opponent down to a hip. He will almost certainly put a hand out on the floor for base so that he doesn't fall, and you would have gotten him out of balance. Okay. So once again, if he elects to stay down here, we're trying to knee pull this guy in, and he's resisting very strongly. We feel him posturing back and away. That's when we start coming up. Once we come up, we turn everything down to the floor and start off balancing him. Okay. So those are always the patterns. Closed guard doesn't have as many directions of off-balancing as open guard does. Open guard has an almost infinite set of directions for off-balancing people. Closed guard tends to be much more forwards and backwards. There are some exceptions. You can go side to side in some situations, but 90% of what you're going to do are going to be knee pull forwards and the two methods of off-balancing to the back, scooping and hip heisting, to put people in a backwards direction. And you want to learn to play those two against each other. Okay, so for example, if Placido goes to stand up, and from here I try hard to knock him backwards, and Placido starts leaning forwards on me, okay, to resist. Well, if he's leaning forward, we're going to go right back into, you guessed it, knee pulls, and bring his hands down to the floor, okay? If I come up into a hip heist, and Placido puts his hands on my body, chest, good, and shoves me back down to the floor, well, I'm sure you can all guess. Now we go into our knee pulls. We break this guy down to the mat, okay? So we play a game which goes between forwards and backwards to off-balance people, okay? Now, if those are the two primary methods, those are the primary directions, forward and backwards. The knee pull is the major method in the forwards direction. We understand we've got to remove posts and then knee pull. You can't just knee pull just by itself. You've got to remove the post, then knee pull. And going backwards, scooping methods and heisting methods are the two main methods of taking people backwards. What I want to give you now are 4 infallible signs that you are doing very well in the battle for position. Okay? The first sign is hands on the mat. If you force your opponent's hands to the mat, you're winning the battle for posture. Doesn't matter whether it's forwards or backwards. Okay? So, someone's in my closed guard. If I take my training partner's hands and work them down to the mat, you're ahead. Doesn't mean you won the game, but you're ahead. Okay? Your opponent now must start taking his hands off the mat. But when he does so, it's tough. You're going into positions now where you can lock up and draw him in very close. Okay? Doesn't matter whether hands are going forwards or backwards. For example, if I see my opponent moving back and away, it might well be the case that we force a hand to the mat backwards. Okay? Again, you're ahead of the game. Once the hand goes on the mat, it becomes very easy to pull people in and get them into positions where now when they go to posture up and away, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very hard from here. Okay? So we're always looking to get those damn hands down to the mat, regardless of the direction that we do it. So that's your first infallible sign. If you're getting the hands to the mat, you're winning. You're ahead. Good. Now, second one, butt to the mat. If you can touch your opponent's butt down to the mat, you're winning. In fact, you're winning very well. So, guy goes to stand up. If we could do something like this and put his butt down on the floor, things are going great. Okay, you've definitely off-balanced him. If he comes up to his knees, puts a leg up, and we've done this to put his hips down to the mat, you're looking great. Okay, so that's your second infallible sign. If you put your opponent's butt down on the mat, broken him down to a hip, you're ahead. You're doing great. Okay, third infallible sign, chest to chest. If you can lock this guy in a chest to chest position, you're doing well. You've broken his stance, you've broken his balance. So, whenever we're in here and we put a hand down to the mat and lock up. Here I've got a pinch headlock. Pastor goes to get away from me, it's going to be tough. Okay, it's hard for someone to do in positions like this. You're in that chest to chest. Before Pastor can do anything to even open my guard, he's going to have to get out of this mess. Doesn't matter whether we've got pinch headlock or our favorite, double underhooks. He goes to move away, it's going to be a pain in the ass. Okay, it's a great position. Shoulder crunch, same thing. Chest to chest position. Shoulder crunch, pinch headlock, double underhooks, they're all good. Okay, double overhooks, anything that maintains our training partner chest to chest is a clear sign that we've done a good job of breaking our training partner's balance. Okay, so what have we got at this point? If you are consistently putting your opponent's hand on the mat, if you are putting his butt or hips down on the mat, if you are breaking your opponent's body into a situation where he's broken down chest to chest, these are all three very clear signs that you are winning the battle for posture. There is a fourth sign that occurs when people go to stand up. When people stand up, typically they need posts in order to stand up. As we saw in an earlier experiment, back down Placido, if Placido tries to stand up with no posts or his post too short on my body, when he goes to stand, it's a joke. You'll always break him down, okay? So he needs those damn posts. When he goes to stand, our whole thing is to keep his shoulders lower than his hips. If Placido's shoulders go higher than his hips, the only direction I can off balance him is backwards, okay? So what do? We hold on tight to the head and we pull with our knees. When Placido goes to move away from me, feels like he's carrying the weight of the world. When he goes to posture up, it's tough. You get inside the leg, pulling with your knees. Poor guy's working overtime here. His postural muscles are getting a hell of a workout. So that's the fourth infallible sign. If you can keep your opponent's shoulders below his hips, you are winning the postural game. Okay? So we've seen the mechanisms of off-balancing people and breaking their posture, and now the four signs. Are his shoulders below his hips when he stands up? If the answer is yes, you're doing great. Have you taken your opponent's hands and touched them to the floor? If so, you're doing great. Have you taken your training partner's butt and touched it down to the mat? Butt and hips to the mat is a good sign that you're winning the postural game. And are you chest to chest with your opponent? If you are chest to chest with your opponent broken down, you are winning the postural game. Those are your four infallible signs of who's winning and who's losing the postural game. We're pushing this theme that closed guard in and of itself is a fairly unexceptional position. There's nothing special about locking your legs around someone when you're underneath them. But if you can change some subtle aspects of this position, in particular, your position relative to your opponent's elbow, and start working into positions like the side scissor, you turn a neutral position into a surprisingly dominant position. This is interesting because most people consider the dominant positions of jiu-jitsu to be top positions, pins where you're either behind them or chest to chest on top of them. And here we are with a position which is quite dominant from underneath someone. That's what's so special about this side scissor position. I'm going to be encouraging you in this video, whenever you're working from closed guard, try every single time to try and convert your closed guard into a side scissor. You won't always be able to do it, but every time you do, you're going to turn a neutral position into a strongly dominant one, and one where you can double or triple the effectiveness of your various attacks. So it's important we understand the mechanics of the side scissor. How do we make it work? How do we constrain a resisting opponent and tie them up in ways where you can start beating people from underneath? Let's start off just looking at side scissor mechanics. Okay, from a classic closed guard scenario, I'm more or less directly underneath my training partner. His elbows are on either side of my body. Okay, so we have no inherent advantage yet. Once we start to take an elbow, don't worry, we'll be looking at how to do that very soon. Once we take an elbow over to the side and get outside of our opponent's elbow, we're getting close to the side scissor position. What we want to be able to do is hook onto our training partner's far lat muscle. And then from here, shift our hips out to the side so that my bottom knee inverts down towards the floor, just like so. Okay. Once we get to this position, we want to relock our feet out to the side. When you were initially in closed guard, your feet were more or less directly behind your opponent, close to the spine. Once we get to side scissor, we're looking to change that and lock our feet outside of our training partner's hip. Now, from this position, there needs to be a good, healthy pull with this arm. If this arm is too relaxed, my opponent can either bring his elbow back into a position of safety or start bringing his head up too easily. And from here, I start to lose a critical battle, the battle for height. We'll be looking at the battle for height in a lot of detail very soon. So our whole thing from here is to use my knee against his knee to push our body away. And then we can start pushing our body further away so that we can relock our side scissor so that my knee is behind his head. This is our desired goal, okay? The further my knee is down his back, the more my opponent can posture up and cause problems. Because ultimately, we're going to be looking to get higher than our opponent's head, okay? And the higher his head is, the harder that job is for me to get higher than his head. So, as much as possible, we want to be pushing our body weight away from him so that when we relock our side scissor, it locks up high with my knee behind his head. So that when I pull in with my knees and my opponent goes to posture up, it's harder work for him to posture up. When my knees are too far down the back and he goes to posture up, it's just my elbow holding him in place. I want to limit the amount of work that my elbow has to do. So I want my elbow to get supported by my knee. And we do that best by pushing away so that my knee is close to my elbow. Now when he goes to posture up, it's a lot harder work for him to do so. Okay? So don't be satisfied with just getting to the basic side scissor position. Go the extra distance. Take your body out, push, and relock it so that your knee is all the way up here behind his back, at the back of his neck. Okay? That way when I pull in with my knees and Jay goes to posture up, it's quite hard work for him to bring his head up. Much harder than if I'm down here somewhere. Okay? Where if I'm not monitoring with my elbow the whole time, he can easily posture up and recover his elbow position. Okay? So once again, once we take the elbow by, from here, first grip, use the lat muscle as a handle. Don't just put your hands superficially on the back and shoulder. The human body is composed of various nooks and crannies that we can use as handles. And one of the very best is the lat muscle. Okay, just as someone who is climbing freehand up the side of a mountain consciously looks for crevices, nooks and crannies to hook his hands into so he can make a better climb, when you climb the human body, you do the same thing. So we find the lat muscle, and then from here, we shift our hips out. I put my knee just inside his knee, and I lock my feet. My knees are pulling in as we do this. And don't be afraid to adjust your grip, coming up to a side, getting a better and better handle on your opponent. Okay? Then we make the movement away by pushing on our training partner's hips. So as we get further away, we can now lock much, much higher on his head and shoulders. With my knee directly behind his head, you now have an excellent ability to control the head and shoulders. When he goes to recover his elbow position, it's so much more difficult when my knee is behind his head than when my feet are down here at the hips. Okay, from here, if he pulls hard at the elbow, he goes right back and recovers. So our whole thing is to get that first handle right there on the lat muscle, pulling my elbow down, and then we start shifting up the body. So that when we lock high, all the way up, knee up here by the head. And this gives us many good things. First, it puts you further behind your opponent's elbow, makes it harder for him to pull away. It makes it easier for us to start climbing our hips up over our training partner's back. So now, as it were, you're hanging your weight off him. You're halfway behind your opponent's back. When Jay goes to recover from positions like this, it's hard for him to bring his elbow back. Okay? So there's this constant attempt on your part to climb around the corner of your training partner's back and get your hips up on top of them. Okay? Ultimately, we want our head on top of them. Don't worry, we'll be coming to that soon. So, once again, we start off just looking at the sheer mechanics of holding the side scissor position. Once we've beaten the elbow by, and don't worry, we'll be looking at how to do that very shortly. We come through, and there's your first important grip. Use the lat muscle. Guys, I cannot emphasize this enough. The human body offers many very useful handles. If you're going to call yourself a master of no-gi training, you must know what these handles are and how to use them. Just as if you're at the airport, you would never just pick your suitcase up by the side of the case. You would use the handle, because that's the most efficient way to use your strength to pick it up. So too when you grab the human body. Don't just grab anywhere. Grab the handles the same way you would with a suitcase. Look for them. If it isn't adequate, switch it. If you still feel it's not adequate, find the area that you find best. I always find working your way up the lat muscle towards the armpit does best for me. Other people like to grab the actual meat of the lat muscle and find that to be a good handle. You find what works best for you, but you've got to use the handles of the body. Now, from here, we want to go up the body. So I put a foot on the hip, scoop my hips out, and now we lock higher and higher with my knees all the way up here behind my training partner's head. When he goes to pull away, pull with your knees. Don't try to hold him with your hands alone. Use your knees actively. Don't be afraid to shift the handle. Sometimes grab the tricep. Okay, that puts your elbow right over the back of his head when he tries to posture up. Now it's awfully difficult. And then from here, start lifting your hips up off the mat so he's carrying your weight. Working your hips around further and further behind him as your knee comes up higher and higher behind the back. And in particular, the back of the head. He's carrying more and more of your weight. And this is where you want to be. Okay, my leg's so high in the lock around my training partner's body that when he goes to posture up, he feels like he's carrying all of my weight through the hips. Okay, that's the general idea, that we want to go around our opponent's body and get angle and bring our weight as high up onto his head and shoulders as possible. When my weight is down here by his hips, he feels strong and his head comes up quite easily. I want my weight all the way up over the head and shoulders. This is where we want to be working. Okay? Please understand, guys, that your opponent has to have this hand on the floor. He has to. If my opponent's a fool and takes his hand off the mat, I'm going to face plant when I bring my hips up. So he has to have his hand on the floor. That gives you guys an excellent handle to work with, where you switch from the lat muscle to the tricep and use that as a handle to start pulling your weight around behind your opponent so that my knee goes right over the back of his head. My knees are pulling in, making his life miserable. When he tries to posture up, it's so damn difficult. And from here, so many ways for us to start attacking. You'll see that my weight is centered over the back of the head where we want it to be, not over his lower back, where now it's just my arms pulling, which hold him in place. I can do this for a short time, but I always, whenever possible, I want to start working my hips up and getting them higher and higher over my training partner's back. And this is a true side scissor position we're in now. You're completely out to the side. Your legs are scissored around his head and shoulders. So when poor Jay goes to move around, he's carrying all the weight over the hips. And there's 1,000 things you can do to start breaking this guy's balance. Okay? And this is good mechanics from the side scissor position. We're looking at the side scissor position, one of the truly dominant positions in bottom game jiu-jitsu. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Most people associate dominant position in jiu-jitsu with either the back or some kind of top pin where you're past your opponent's legs, side control, knee on belly, north-south, mounted position, etc. Those are all dominant positions, it's true. But jiu-jitsu is a game of top and bottom positions. So the obvious question is, okay, are there any dominant bottom positions? Well, in my opinion, one of the most dominant of them all is the side scissor. And I'm going to be strongly encouraging you throughout this video, whenever you work from bottom position and close guard in particular, convert it to side scissor. Okay, that's one of the very few times in the sport of jiu-jitsu where you can be considered to be dominant despite being underneath your opponent. It's dominant in the same way that side control is. Okay, you're halfway to your opponent's back, you're halfway to all the best sweeps and submissions in the sport. If you're going to play bottom game, side scissor is one of the very best positions you can ever work from. So it's important for us to be able to convert close guard into side scissor as smoothly and efficiently as possible. In my opinion, the single best method of doing this, especially when we work without a gi, is the elbow post method. It's not the only way of doing it, but it's probably the smoothest, the easiest for most people to employ. Let's have a look at it right now. Okay, what is an elbow post? That's where we take our training partner's arm and we post our hand on the outside of the elbow and we engage in a pushing action across the body. Okay, don't confuse an elbow post with an arm drag. An arm drag is a pulling motion, where I pull across the chest. It's a good motion, works very well, and we'll be looking at it next. But an elbow post is not a pull, it's a push, okay, where I push across, like so, as opposed to a drag, which is a pulling motion. Now, why do we put such a high stock on this? Anytime I have both a wrist and an elbow, and my elbow is close to my body, I can utilize the combined action of the pull of my legs with the push of my hands to direct his elbow across and force him to base out with his other arm. And that's going to position us outside of his elbow. And as we've seen earlier in this video, if I'm in close guard and I ever get outside my opponent's elbow, I'm halfway to his back. And from here we can start working our way into the side scissor. So, how are we going to do this under combat conditions? Well, it's going to come down to first getting the hand to the center line. How are we going to do this? Well, some of our opponents just put the hand on the center line when they go to stand up in your closed guard. Okay, the hand's right there. If we see that, we just grab two wrists and just take it on by. Then we put a hand on our training partner's elbow. Now guys, the big mistake everyone makes with elbow posts is they just use their hands. They just try to push with their hands across. That's not going to do it. 90% of the work is done with the knee pull with the legs, where my two knees pull in towards them. Your hands only give direction. The horsepower comes from your legs. Okay? If my opponent puts hands on biceps, then we have to go across and grab like so. I bring my hand over and grip. Now I take the hand to the center line. That's always step number one. And then I pull with my two legs and then I elbow post. Okay, so let's break this down as clearly as we can, Jay. Let's change the angle a little bit. Okay, not that far. Okay, hands on. I cannot elbow post until I bring the hand to the center line. Okay, you cannot post from here. So step number one is bring the hand to the center line. Okay, step number two is to pull with your two knees. And step number three is to elbow post and bring the elbow across. Okay? No one in the world is strong enough to just elbow post from here with the hand on the bicep. No one's that strong. So your first thing is you got to be able to get the hand here to the center line. No one in the world is strong enough to just shove the elbow across on someone their own size and strength. You pull here, you got nothing. It's all about the pull of the legs. Okay, when he goes to recover balance, that's when you push. Okay, remember guys, you're not that strong at just shoving elbows across. If he's the same size and strength as you, you're never going to do it. What enables you to do it is the pulling in of your legs. Okay, but pulling in with the legs won't do any good if his hands are on your body. He's braced. So step number one, take away the brace. Put the hand on the center line. Doesn't matter whether he's got his hand touching you or if it's in the air. Not going to make a difference. Then pull with your legs to get him out of balance. And then when his balance is broken, that's when you push across. Okay? Now, there's nothing more tragic than seeing someone hit a nice elbow post and then grab the guy's lat, and they're holding with the wrist, and the guy just pulls his elbow back and breaks it, presumably to the other side for safety. Okay, then you've lost everything. So it's very important, once we hit that post and bring it through, that from here we get a good handle on the lat muscle, which enables us to pull down with the lat muscle, and don't push across, push in towards the hip, so that I can get my body behind his tricep. So when he goes to recover, it's quite difficult. Now, we're working without a gi here. If we had a gi, we could grab the gi cloth, the sleeve cuff, and work it in. I could grab his lapel and feed it in. You'd have a very strong grip. But we're working without a gi, so the grips aren't as strong here. So we've got to move more. We've got to emphasize more the movement around the body to hold him in. So I'm going to strongly encourage you guys to always shift out and start locking out here. To shift out further and get all the way up and switch your grips from the lat to the tricep and get your asses off the floor. So you're turning around the corner. Okay, so your whole body's behind his tricep. When Jay goes to pull his arm out now, it's not that I'm strong holding him in with my hands, it's that my whole body is positioned behind his shoulder. When my body is not positioned behind his shoulder, that's when Jay can take his elbow out and recover. Okay, so biggest differences between gi and no gi. I'm sure you've all seen footage of a very close friend of mine, Roger Gracie, employing this move with a gi. And part of the reason why he was so effective is because he's a master of gi gripping. And he would often use a combination of sleeve cuff and far lapel to wedge his opponent's arms in place. But now we're doing it without a gi, and we don't have those mechanical advantages of gripping through the jacket. My advice to you is simple. When you don't have a jacket to work with, focus on your damn hips. Get your hips behind your shoulder and tricep. It's more about movement with no gi. Okay, I can't just stop him in place using the jacket. If I can't stop him, I've got to move myself. And I want to move my hips around behind him. You don't have to be the fastest guy in the gym, but you can't procrastinate either. Work your way around behind. Let me show you exactly what I mean by this. So, step number 1 is take his hand to the center line. That enables me to go to step number 2, which is pull with both of my knees. And that's what enables me to go to step number 3, which is elbow post. Okay? Once you get there, use the lat handle. Okay? Now, my word to you is, congratulations, you've just done a nice elbow post. But don't get too happy, you're not there yet. A strong opponent will lift his head, yank his elbow, and recover. Because you don't have that much gripping power to work with here with no gi. Okay? So my advice to you is, change your body position. Get behind his shoulder and tricep. So, start moving your body out by shifting. And then from here, locking higher and higher on the back. And switch your grip from the lat muscle to the tricep. Okay? Now, you might be saying, well, what if my opponent's arm's not there? Well, if his arm's not there, he's a freaking idiot. If his hand comes off the floor, all I have to do is push forward and his balance is broken. Okay? So he has to put his hand on the floor. It's going to be there, trust me. Okay? Now grab the tricep. Don't grab down by the elbow. Grab the meat of the tricep with the whole hand. Don't grab with your fingers. Put the whole wrist around so you've got a good handle to work with. Going back to that theory of the handle. The human body offers numerous good handles for you to work with. It started with the lat, now you got the tricep. Now, I'm going to take my hand off Jay, and Jay and I are going to do a little experiment. From this side scissor position, Jay's going to try and take his elbow out and recover position. You can stand up, you can do whatever you want, Jay. As long as my hips are behind his shoulder, he's never going to do it. Your side scissor is robust, okay? But if my hips drop to the ground, that's when Jay's head can come up. That's when Jay can recover, okay? So guys, this is a very important point. Remember, we're working the side scissor without the gi now. So we can't just go through and hold the lapel and let the lapel do the work for us. We can't get the sleeve cuff and stretch it out and let the sleeve cuff do the work for us. So if the gi's not going to work for us, you got to do the work yourself. And how do we do that? by climbing your hips behind your opponent's shoulder and tricep. Okay, so one more time, because this is a very important point. We start off, close guard situation, elbow posting. Step number 1, take the hand to the center line. Step number 2, pull in with the strength of both of your knees to off balance him so that you can go to step number 3, elbow post. Post the elbow across like so and get outside of his elbow. Then from here, we've got to keep ourselves outside the elbow. That's where things get interesting. First grip, that first handle is the lat muscle. That's what's going to enable us to come in close, put our foot on the hip, and scoot out to the side and go into the classic side scissor position. From side scissor, we convert to tricep and we start pulling our body over our training partner's back. Okay, locking higher and higher, almost like I'm turning down. When he tries to take his arms out now, no hands. Got to take your arm out, buddy. Very, very difficult as long as my body's oriented down towards the floor. But when my body orients up towards the ceiling, that's when people start pulling out and getting free. Okay? So there you have it, fellas, the elbow post method. This, in my opinion, is the single best method, both with and without a gi. We've seen, obviously, the no gi version of it. This is, in my opinion, the surest way to go from a closed guard to a side scissor. We're looking at the idea of converting closed guard into the side scissor position. We're trading a neutral position for a dominant position. Previously, we looked at the elbow post method, which I believe is the single best method of getting behind outside of our opponent's elbow and starting to threaten their back from side scissor situation. Another method also very effective is an arm drag method. Now, the arm drag is a very well-known move in the sport of jiu-jitsu. It's been used for many, many years. It's typically done from open guard scenarios where we're seated, okay? And from seated situations, we're looking to drag and expose our training partner's back and work like so, okay? From closed guard, it's got a rather different feel to it because, of course, closed guard is typically a supine position. You typically start on your back. And the bad news is if you start on your back, it's pretty much impossible to hit an arm drag. So we're going to have to do something here. So from closed guard situation, we start supine. If you try and perform an arm drag, and again, I have to take my opponent's hand to the center line first, just like an elbow post. As long as I'm supine, the angle is wrong. When I try to drag, Jay's head is so upright relative to mine that when I go to pull on his arm, he pulls back, he just slips out really easily. Okay, and you'll see people trying to hit arm drags in closed guard with just no success whatsoever. Okay, so it's important we understand when we go to hit arm drags from closed guard, you got to sit up while you're maintaining a closed guard. Now, this is where things get interesting. If my opponent has weak posture, okay, and I'm controlling his hands, if I go to sit up, I'm transferring weight onto him and he will tend to fall forwards because of the weakness of his posture. Now, that's actually good news for you. If I feel my opponent's posture is weak and there's just no connection to my body, there's no need for us to take his back, to be honest with you. Just start pulling in with your legs and you get good results from closed guard just right off the bat. Things get interesting when your opponent starts having a strong upright posture. It's typically when guys start working with their hands here, down by your hips, okay? Here's a rule of thumb for you which will help you out a lot when you're working from closed guard. If your opponent's hands are above the line of your chest or your elbows, it's best to hit elbow posts. When his hands are below the line of your chest, it's best to hit arm drags. Okay, so this is an important little simple rule, which I'll give to you again. It's pretty important. The more my opponent's hands are up by my chest and shoulders, the more inclined I am to hit elbow posts. They tend to be the more effective move. But elbow posts become difficult when the hands are down here by the hips. But arm drags become easier. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we see his body is relatively upright. We're going to pull ourselves up to him like we're doing a sit-up. Now, if he's got a strong posture, you will be able to stay upright in this position. If I go to pull myself up and his posture is weak, well, he will collapse. And that's fine because I've broken his posture. Okay? But if my opponent has his hands here on my hips, presumably he's posturing up to open my guard. So we're going to catch our training partner at the wrist, either here or here. I leave it up to you. They're both good grips. As I feel the strength of his posture, I perform something like a sit-up. I just come up like so, and I grab all the way up here in the tricep. When he tries to pull away from you, you've got an excellent pulling grip on your training partner. And then from here, we're going to go back down to the floor and pull his arm on by. Once you've beaten the elbow, you guys know the drill from here. We go hunting for the lat muscle. We find that first good, strong grip. Now, I'm just going to change the angle so you can get a better view. You've got to find something cool here. Unlike an elbow post, the arm drag grip is a very good grip after the move is performed. Okay, it makes it a lot easier to get into the side scissor position. So what I generally find is there are fewer opportunities to get to an arm drag from closed guard because most people have their hands up above the chest. That's where we work our elbow posts. But when you do get them, they tend to make it easier for you to get into the side scissor because you have a strong pulling grip on your opponent's arm. Okay, so we start off. I notice that his hands are low on my body. If his hands were high on my body, I would probably favor elbow posting above arm dragging. Okay, but when the hands are down low, I see his posture is strong. He's trying to posture up. We just take our hand in and we just sit up. Okay, from the sit up position, I pull everything across the body and I bring my training partner down to the mat. Because I have a pulling grip, Jay just showed them that grip, I have that pulling arm drag grip. When he goes to yank out and away from me, it's much more difficult because I'm holding high up with a big part of the strong part of my wrist, as opposed to an elbow post where I'm just holding with my fingers. Here, I'm holding him with the whole wrist, forearm, and elbow. It's a strong grip. He goes to yank out. It won't be easy. It's going to take some time. Here, I'm just holding with my fingers. So when he vigorously yanks out, it's gone, unless I get behind him. So once we lock up in here, we start that same action that we talked about with regards our elbow post. We get our feet out to the side and do a classic side scissor. And then from here, we put our feet on our training partner's hips and start walking everything out and away from our training partner. We grab our training partner at the tricep and we start pulling our legs up over our training partner's shoulders. Just like so. With my thigh and knee on the back of his head, this is a true side scissor. Okay, my body almost facing down to the mat. When Jay goes to pull his arms free now, it's awfully difficult. Okay, and this is where we want to be, hanging off your opponent's head, as opposed to hanging off his lower back. Okay, that's a true side scissor position. So we come in, we get that good arm drag grip. Okay, and then we do what we always do. As we start working our body out to the side, we pull on that tricep, getting our hips over the top of the back of his head. So when Jay goes to yank out, it's awfully difficult for him to pull his arms free. And now you're in a very strong attacking position. Okay, so let's have a look at all that from another angle. Closed guard situation. First things first, study your opponent's hand position. If the hands are on the chest or above, this is the best time to do the move we saw previously, the elbow post. However, if my opponent does what so many people in jiu-jitsu do, they put the hand in close to the hips, it's going to make elbow posts quite difficult, but it will make arm drags significantly easier. We grip, we perform a good sit-up, punch the hand all the way through, wrist deep, and then we just yank down to the mat, just like so. Now we get a handle on the lat muscle. From the lat muscle, you've got a good bite on his leg. And we start that action of pushing our hips out and getting up into side scissor. From side scissor, we transfer to the tricep. We start pushing our hips up, coming up on our elbow and locking with our legs all the way over our training partner's neck and head. So when he goes to pull out of here, it's very difficult indeed. You've got an excellent bite over your training partner's body and a great position to attack. Okay? So this is a really practical way for us to use arm drags to get into the side scissor position. We're looking at converting a closed guard into a side scissor. We've seen what I believe are the two best methods, elbow posting and arm drag methods. Now let's look at another method which is very effective but usually looks a little bit messy. This is an underhook method. This is kind of a scrappy, tough way to work your way over time into a side scissor. elbow posts, arm drags, they can look quite elegant. You come up, boom, hit a nice arm drag, take an elbow post, take the arm by. It's a nice way to transition, looks smooth. Underhooks typically don't look like that. You get to the underhook and you have to battle your way over time. Sometimes your opponent headlocks you and you have to finagle your way out. It looks a little scrappy, a little messy, but who cares? It works. So let's have a look at it right now. From a situation where we start off in closed guard, there will be many times that we are able to get into underhook situations underneath our training partner's arms. When we see this, we're going to go through and we're going to convert to a pinch headlock. A pinch headlock involves a situation where I take my underhook arm all the way around our training partner's head so my thumb comes almost to the carotid artery. You have a choice between 5-finger grips, wrist-to-wrist grips, palm-to-palm grips. They all work very well. I'm going to encourage you guys to take your pick based on what you feel. I've seen great results from all 3 grips. Okay. From the situation, as we pull down, the main thing to emphasize is that the underhook grip is long and the other grip is short. So we hold in just like so. Now, from here, we start that action of getting all the way out towards the side, and then we're going to switch our hand from locked hands to open hands. I'm going to post inside my training partner's elbow to wrist. Doesn't really matter which one we use. Then from here, we start finagling our body out to the side and we swish our training partner's arm on. Okay? As soon as we get to this position, I'm sure you can all guess what comes next. You are now in a side scissor position. Side scissor is good, but it just keeps getting better when we scoot further and further away from our training partner and start building up to an elbow. We start holding on to our training partner's tricep and locking our legs high up and over our training partner's shoulders. Okay? Again, when Jay goes to yank out of here, it's so damn difficult when you're all the way up behind your opponent in these good attacking positions. Okay? Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, hey, that didn't look so messy, it looked pretty clean to me. Well, it's not going to be, right now Jay's not resisting, so it's not going to look that pretty in competition. There's probably going to be some considerable resistance here as they hold onto your head and shoulders, and you're going to have to fight and scrap. It might take you 10, 20, 30 seconds to work your way past that underhook, through a pinch headlock, and then come up into side scissor. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal. It's all part of the fun. So, from another angle, we start off, however we do it, we get underneath our training partner, we hit a knee pull that puts his hands on the mat, okay? Doesn't matter how you do this. You might have 2 on one wrist, knee pull, and get underneath. You might have double tricep posts, knee pull, and get underneath, okay? You might fake a drag, he goes to pull out, and you find yourself in an underhook, okay? There's 1,000 ways to do it. However you do it, you get into situations like so, okay? Now we convert to pinch headlock. Arm goes deep, and we lock. We find an angle coming out to the side, and then from this position, we're ready to start our game. We post inside our training partner's tricep, inside the elbow, sometimes even the wrist. Sometimes you can push on your training partner's knee to help get those angles that you seek. From these situations, we come up on an elbow, and then from here, we come out around the corner. You can see that if your opponent held onto your head, that would be a pain in the ass. Hold on. Okay, so you might have to finagle, work, and bring that arm by. However you do it, we lock up and we get to side scissor. From side scissor, we hook the far tricep. We start that action of throwing our legs over our training partner's body. So when he tries to bring his arms free, it's well nigh impossible. You're well locked around your opponent's body. Your hips are on top of his head. So when he tries to pull free, it's awfully difficult. Okay, from these situations, you can get a great win from bottom position. Let's look at it from another angle so you can see more of this. Okay, from closed guard situation, however we do it, we get his hands on the mat. Once the hands go on the mat, we can start getting into underhook type situations. From underhook, we're always looking for angle to convert to pinch headlocks. So when he tries to pull away from us, it's very difficult. However we do it, we're going to look to get angle on our training partner, start to maneuver out to the side. Now our whole thing is to convert, to prevent his second hand from coming in and interfering. You can push on your buddy's knees, whatever it takes. You can grab his forearm. You can come out with your elbow and look downwards. Anything that puts his hands down on the mat. From this situation, we turn and lock. We grab the tricep, and we use that as an anchor to continually pull our legs around the corner and lock up with our leg on the back of his head. So when Jay goes to yank out, it's damn near impossible. And you've got excellent control over where this guy goes. Okay, you're truly behind him now in a good position to attack. So, how to get to the dreaded side scissor position with an underhook. We're looking at the idea of entering into the side scissor position. We've looked at some very effective methods. Now let's start to look at a method which becomes particularly useful when you start to encounter very strong, educated resistance. Once you get good at a given move, your opponent's going to figure out it's one of your favorites, and they're going to find ways to make it difficult. Okay, the misdirectional method of entering side scissor is designed to get you into the move against knowledgeable resistance. So we start off closed guard situation. We manage to take our training partner through. I'll demonstrate out of an elbow post. From here, I'm looking to get angle and height on my training partner. Okay, he knows that. So what he will want to do is push into me and start squaring up. When he pushes into me, he becomes vulnerable to sweeps in this direction. I'm going to hit a pendulum sweep with no real expectation of taking him over. I just want to elicit a defensive reaction. Now my pendulum sweep is taking him to my left. Okay, so I'm interested in sweeping the guy in this direction here. So what do you think Jay's going to do when I start sweeping in that direction? He's going to take all his body weight in the opposite direction. So when I hit my pendulum, I see that resistance. That's when we just go right back into the original move, and now I've got angle and height over my training partner. As soon as we get here, we know what the deal is. We start getting higher than our training partner. We start coming up around the corner, getting our weight on top of him, and find ourselves now in the perfect position to start going on the attack. We've got to our scores, we've got to a finishing position, and we're ready to go. Okay. So once again, we start off. We hit an initial attack, looking for the side scissor using this elbow post, and I see my opponent pushing into me to recover position. So I threaten with a sweep, and I feel his resistance. As he resists, we just come back the other way. Now we're in the perfect position to start building up, and we've got height on him already. I've got to get my hips on top of him now. So we just pull with our whole body, throw our body around the corner, and there we are. We're right up on top of this guy in the perfect position to attack. If you've got short legs and you can't get to a full body lock, just cross your ankles, or even just put your knee close to your own foot. Okay? Either way, whichever method you use, you'll be in the perfect position now to start breaking this guy down to the mat and getting to your scores.